The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest structure ever built by intelligent life. It floated in the darkness between stars. A massive ring of metal and glass where 12 alien species gathered to decide the fate of the galaxy. Thousands of delegates filled the chamber, their bodies ranging from the tall and elegant Velrani to the massive stone-like forms of the Korthian Empire. And among them, looking small and fragile by comparison, stood the representatives of Earth. Ambassador Daniel Harris had served in this hall for 15 years. He had learned to speak 7 alien languages. He had memorized the customs and traditions of species that had been traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves. He had done everything possible to prove that humanity deserved its place among the great civilizations of the galaxy today. All of that effort felt worthless. He stood at the central podium, his hands gripping the edges so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. On the massive screen behind him, images played in an endless loop. Burning cities, fleeing civilians, ships descending from the sky with weapons blazing. The human colony on Kepler-4 Fortuby was dying, and the galaxy was watching it happen. "I am asking one more time," Harris said, his voice carrying across the silent chamber. "The Vorthok Syndicate is attacking our people. 40,000 humans are trapped on that planet with no way to escape. We need military support. We need it now." The Valrani delegate rose from her seat. She was beautiful in an alien way, with scales that shimmered like opals and eyes that held no warmth at all. Her name was impossible for human tongues to pronounce, so Harris had always called her simply the Speaker in his mind. "The Council has reviewed your request," she said. "Again, the Vorthok Syndicate has not officially declared war on humanity. Their actions on Kepler-4 Fortuby are classified as a territorial dispute. Council military intervention in territorial disputes requires unanimous approval from all 12 member species. They are killing children," Harris said. "They are securing resources in a contested zone," the Speaker replied. "This is regrettable, but it does not meet the threshold for intervention." Harris looked around the chamber. He saw the Korthian representative, a massive creature with 4 arms and skin like gray rock, examining his claws with obvious boredom. He saw the Syndicate's own delegates sitting in their section, barely hiding their amusement. He saw species after species avoiding his gaze, unwilling to meet the eyes of a man whose people were being slaughtered. His earpiece crackled. A voice from Earth's military command spoke quietly into his ear. "Ambassador, we've lost contact with the colony. The Syndicate ships have destroyed the communication arrays. Based on last reports, resistance has collapsed. We estimate complete loss of civilian population within the hour." Harris closed his eyes. 40,000 people, families, children, gone. He removed the earpiece slowly and placed it on the podium. "This council," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "has failed humanity for the last time." Far away, in orbit around Earth's moon, Admiral Catherine Moore watched the same broadcast on the bridge of her flagship. The Resolute was the pride of humanity's fleet, a warship built with technology borrowed and purchased from a dozen alien species. It was powerful by human standards. By galactic standards, it was barely worth noticing. Moore was 63 years old. She had spent her entire adult life serving Earth's interests among the stars. She had requested permission to take her fleet to Kepler-4 for to be 7 times in the past week. 7 times the Council had denied her. 7 times she had been forced to sit and watch as her people died. Her first officer, Commander Benjamin Drake, stood beside her in silence. He was a young man, only 32, but the past week had aged him. There were dark circles under his eyes, and a tightness in his jaw that hadn't been there before. "It's over," Moore said. "The colony has fallen." Drake said nothing. There was nothing to say. On Earth, President Samuel Grant sat in the Situation Room beneath the White House, surrounded by his closest advisors. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of computers and the distant sound of protests in the streets above. Word had spread quickly. The people of Earth knew what had happened. They knew that once again the galaxy had turned its back on them. Secretary of Defense Linda Patterson placed a tablet on the table in front of the president. "This is the 14th time in 20 years," she said. 14 colonies attacked. 14 requests for assistance. 14 denials. Grant picked up the tablet and scrolled through the data. Names and numbers. Dates and death tolls. A history written in human blood. "When we joined the council," he said slowly, "we believed we were entering a community of equals. We believed that cooperation would benefit everyone. We were naive." His chief of staff, a woman named Dorothy Flynn, leaned forward. "Sir, if we withdraw from the council, we lose access to the Jumpgate network. We lose trade agreements with 37 species. Our economy will suffer. Our colonies will be isolated." "Our colonies are already being destroyed," Grant replied. "What good are trade agreements if we cannot protect our own people?" The room fell silent. Grant stood and walked to the window. Outside, he could see the lights of Washington stretching toward the horizon. 8 billion people lived on Earth now. Another 3 billion were scattered across colonies throughout the galaxy. 11 billion human lives, and the council saw them as nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "Call a special session of Parliament," he said. "I want to vote on withdrawal from the Galactic Council. I want it tonight." The vote was not close. After 2 hours of debate, the United Earth Parliament voted 847 to 23 in favor of withdrawal. The people of Earth watched the results with a mixture of fear and fierce pride. They were alone now. Truly alone. But at least they would face the darkness on their own terms. Harris delivered the formal announcement the following morning. He stood once again at the central podium of the council chamber, but this time there was no desperation in his voice. There was only cold certainty. "The United Earth Government hereby withdraws from the Galactic Council," he said. "Effective immediately, all treaties and agreements between humanity and council member species are dissolved. Human space is closed to council vessels. Any ship entering our territory without permission will be considered hostile." The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates shouted in a dozen languages. The speaker demanded order, her voice rising above the noise. "You cannot do this," she said when the chamber finally quieted. "You are the youngest species in this assembly. You have no independent faster-than-light capability. You cannot survive without us." Harris looked at her for a long moment. He thought about the 40,000 people who had died while she debated procedure. He thought about all the times humanity had begged for help and received only excuses. "Watch us," he said. Then he turned and walked out of the chamber. He did not look back. Behind him, the delegates of 12 alien species watched in stunned silence as humanity turned. Its back on the galaxy, none of them understood what they had just done. None of them realized that they had created something far more dangerous than an enemy. They had created a humanity with nothing left to lose. The first year after withdrawal was the hardest. Without access to the Council's Jumpgate network, human ships could only travel at a fraction of their former speed. Colonies that had been days away were now months distant. Trade routes collapsed. Supplies ran low. The economy stumbled and nearly fell. The Council watched with satisfaction. Their representatives made public statements predicting humanity's return within 5 years. Some said 3. The Velrani speaker herself declared that humans would come crawling back within 18 months. Begging for readmission, they were all wrong. Deep beneath the surface of Luna, in a facility that did not officially exist, Dr. Nathan Cole worked 20-hour days. He was a thin man with messy gray hair and glasses that he constantly forgot to clean. Before the withdrawal, he had been a professor of theoretical physics at MIT. Now, he was the director of Project Phoenix, humanity's most secret and most important research program. His team consisted of the brightest minds Earth had ever produced. Engineers, physicists, biologists, programmers. They came from every nation on the planet, united by a single purpose: to make humanity independent of alien technology. The Council species have had faster-than-light travel for over 50,000 years, Cole told his team on their first day. In all that time, they have made almost no improvements to the basic technology. They found something that worked, and they stopped innovating. We will not make that mistake. They started by taking apart every piece of alien technology humanity possessed: jump gate components, communication arrays, weapons systems, engine cores. They studied each device down to its smallest pieces, learning not just how it worked, but why it worked. Then they made it better. In the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, a different kind of work was happening. Commander Lisa Grant, the president's daughter, oversaw the construction of a new fleet. She was 34 years old, with her father's stubborn determination and her mother's brilliant tactical mind. She had resigned her commission in the regular Navy to take this assignment, knowing that if she failed, humanity might not survive. The shipyard was hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid nearly 50 kilometers across. Thousands of workers lived there in complete isolation, cut off from all communication with the outside world. They built ships unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. "The Council thinks we are weak because we are young," Grant told her officers. "They forget that youth means we have not yet learned what is impossible. Our ships will be faster, stronger, and more adaptable than anything they can imagine." Engineer Carlos Rivera led the team developing the new propulsion system. He was a quiet man who rarely spoke more than necessary, but when he worked, his hands moved with an artist's grace. For 2 years, he struggled with a problem that alien scientists had declared unsolvable: how to travel faster than light without using the jump gates. The answer, when it finally came, was elegant in its simplicity. The Council's jump gates worked by creating artificial wormholes between fixed points in space. Rivera's system did something different. It folded space itself around the ship, allowing it to slip between the folds like a needle through fabric. The first test was conducted in secret. 3 years after withdrawal, a small probe equipped with Rivera's drive vanished from the Sol system and reappeared near Alpha Centauri 4 hours later. The journey that would have taken months using conventional engines had been completed in less time than it took to watch a movie. Cole cried when he saw the data. Rivera simply nodded and went back to work, already thinking about improvements. While the scientists built new tools, General Patricia Shaw built a new kind of soldier. She established training facilities on Mars, far from any eyes that might report back to the Council. There she created the Earth Defense Force. Shaw was 60 years old, a veteran of conflicts on 3 continents before humanity ever reached the stars. She had studied every war in human history, from the battles of ancient empires to the resource conflicts of the previous century. She understood something that the Council's species had forgotten. War was not just about technology. It was about will. Aliens have bigger ships and more advanced weapons, she told her recruits. But they have been at peace for so long that they have forgotten how to fight. They follow patterns. They rely on rules. We will teach them that humans follow no rules but our own. Her training programs were brutal. Cadets learned to fight in every environment, from the vacuum of space to the crushing pressure of gas-giant atmospheres. They studied alien psychology, learning to predict how each species would react under pressure. They practiced tactics that no Council military had ever encountered. Meanwhile, Intelligence Officer Marcus Bell built a network of spies throughout Council space. He was an unremarkable-looking man, the kind of person you would forget 5 minutes after meeting him. This made him perfect for his job. His agents were everywhere: human merchants who had stayed behind after withdrawal, sympathetic aliens who had grown tired of Council corruption, automated systems hidden in the data streams of 1,000 worlds. Through them, Bell learned secrets that the Council thought buried forever. The truth about Kepler 442b was the worst of these secrets. Bell brought the evidence to President Grant personally. On a cold winter night in the 7th year of isolation, the data was undeniable. 3 Council species, including the Velrani, had secretly funded the Vorthok Syndicate's attack on the human colony. They had provided weapons, intelligence, and most importantly, a guarantee that the Council would not intervene. The attack had not been random violence. It had been a deliberate attempt to weaken humanity. To remind the young species of their place in the galactic order, Grant read the report in silence. When he finished, his hands were shaking. "They murdered our people," he said quietly. "Not through negligence. Through deliberate planning?" "Yes, sir," Bell replied. Grant stood and walked to his window. Outside, snow was falling on Washington. The city was peaceful, unaware of the truth that had just been revealed. "How long until the fleet is ready?" he asked. "Admiral Moore estimates 2 more years for full deployment capability. The new drive systems are being installed now." Grant nodded slowly. 2 years. "Can we keep this secret that long?" "We've kept it secret for 7 years already," Bell said. 2 more will not be a problem." The president turned back to his intelligence chief. There was something new in his eyes, something cold and hard. "When the fleet is ready," he said, "I want to know everything about the species that did this. Their military strength, their political weaknesses, their fears, everything." Bell allowed himself a small smile. "Already working on it, sir? The 10th year of isolation, the Council sent a diplomatic envoy to Earth. They expected to find a broken civilization, desperate for help. Instead, they found a world transformed. New cities had risen across the planet. Orbital stations circled overhead in numbers that seemed impossible. And everywhere they looked, they saw humans moving with purpose and confidence. The envoy reported back that humanity appeared to be surviving, but offered no explanation for how. The Council dismissed the report as exaggeration. They would soon learn the truth. The Galactic Council was in the middle of a routine session when the alarms began. Warning lights flashed across every control panel in the Great Chamber. Delegates looked up from their discussions in confusion. The station's defense systems had detected something impossible. Ships were arriving, not through the jump gates that surrounded the station, but directly from empty space. One moment there was nothing. The next moment, there were 200 warships in perfect formation, surrounding the Council's capital in every direction. The ships were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. They were sleek and angular, painted in dark colors that seemed to absorb the light of distant stars. Their hulls showed no visible weapons, no obvious engines. Nothing that the Council's sensors could identify or understand. Ambassador Daniel Harris appeared on every screen in the chamber. He looked older than he had 12 years ago when he walked out of this same room. His hair had gone gray at the temples, and there were lines on his face that had not been there before. But his eyes were the same. Cold, certain, unforgiving. "Members of the Galactic Council," he said, his voice calm and clear. "Humanity has returned." The chamber erupted in chaos. The Velrani speaker shouted for order, her scales flushing dark with anger. The Korthian representative bellowed demands for explanation. The syndicate delegates were already moving toward the exits, their fear obvious even across species lines. Harris waited patiently for the noise to die down. He was in no hurry. He had waited 12 years for this moment. "You are probably wondering how we arrived here without using your jump gates," continued, when the chamber finally quieted. "The answer is simple. We built something better. Your gates are anchored to fixed points in space. Our ships can travel anywhere at any time without warning. Your entire military strategy is based on controlling the gates. That strategy is now worthless." Admiral Catherine Moore watched from the bridge of the Resolute, which now served as the flagship of humanity's new fleet. She was 75 years old, and she had expected to die before seeing this day. Instead, she was about to witness the most important moment in human history. "Status report," she said quietly. Commander Benjamin Drake, now her executive officer, checked his displays. "All ships in position, Admiral. The syndicate fleet is holding at the edge of the system. 312 vessels. They do not appear to know what to do." Moore allowed herself a small smile. "They expected us to come through the gates, where they could ambush us. They never considered that we might simply appear behind them." On the Council station, Harris was still speaking. 12 years ago, you told us we could not survive alone. You were confident that we would come crawling back, begging for readmission to your precious Council. Instead, we spent those years preparing, learning, growing stronger." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We also spent those years investigating. We know the truth about Kepler 442b. We know that the attack on our colony was not random violence. We know that 3 species in this chamber funded and supported the Syndicate's assault on our people. We have evidence, names, dates, communications, everything. The chamber went silent. The Velrani speaker's scales had gone pale, a sign of extreme distress in her species. Several delegates were looking at each other with sudden suspicion. "But we did not come here for revenge," Harris said. "At least, not against all of you. We came here to deliver a message and to settle a debt." In the space outside the station, Commander Lisa Grant led a strike team toward the Syndicate delegate's private vessel. Her ship was small and fast, designed for exactly this kind of operation. Her crew consisted of 12 of the most highly trained soldiers in human history. "Target vessel acquired," her pilot reported. "They are attempting to power up their engines." Grant smiled grimly. "They won't get far. Disable their propulsion." A single shot from their forward weapon struck the Syndicate ship with surgical precision. The vessel's engines went dark, leaving it drifting helplessly in space. "Boarding team, prepare for entry." The operation took less than 5 minutes. Grant's soldiers cut through the hull, neutralized the small security force, and captured all 4 Syndicate delegates without killing anyone. They were professionals. They did not need to be cruel. Back in the council chamber, Harris received confirmation that the capture was complete. He nodded slightly and returned his attention to the assembled delegates. The Syndicate representatives are now in human custody. They will be transported to Earth, where they will stand trial for their role in the murder of 40,000 human citizens. The evidence against them will be made public. The galaxy will know what they did. The Syndicate fleet commander's voice crackled across the communication channels, demanding the release of his delegates. Harris ignored him. "As for the rest of you," he continued, "we have a simple demonstration to offer." Admiral Moore's voice came through, calm and professional. "All ships commence Operation Reckoning." The human fleet moved as one. 200 warships accelerated toward the Syndicate fleet with impossible speed. The Syndicate commander ordered his vessels to open fire. But their weapons seemed to pass through the human ships without effect. Energy shields that the Council had never seen before absorbed every attack. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 11 minutes. Human weapons tore through Syndicate vessels with terrifying efficiency. Ships that had been the terror of a dozen species were reduced to burning wreckage in seconds. The Syndicate fleet tried to retreat, tried to scatter, tried everything their commanders could think of. Nothing worked. When it was over, 312 Syndicate vessels had been destroyed. Human losses were 0. Across the galaxy, billions of beings watched the broadcast in stunned disbelief. The Vorthok Syndicate had been one of the most feared military powers in known space. They had bullied and terrorized weaker species for centuries, and humanity had just destroyed their entire fleet without losing a single ship. Harris appeared on screen one final time. Behind him, the wreckage of the Syndicate fleet drifted silently through space. "This was not an act of war," he said. "This was justice. The Syndicate attacked our people. They killed our families. They did this with the support and encouragement of species who sit in this very chamber. Today, we have begun to balance that debt." He paused, his eyes sweeping across the assembled delegates. "Humanity is not rejoining your council. We do not need your permission to travel the stars. We do not need your protection. We do not need anything from you at all. But understand this clearly. Any species that harms human citizens will face consequences. This is not a threat. This is not a negotiation. This is simply a fact." The transmission ended. The human fleet held position for several minutes, long enough to ensure that every sensor in the system had recorded their presence. Then, one by one, the ships vanished. They did not use the jump gates. They simply folded space around themselves and disappeared, leaving the Council alone with the wreckage of everything they had believed about humanity in the Great Chamber. No one spoke for a very long time. The youngest species in the galaxy had just proven that they were also the most dangerous, and they had made it clear that they were just getting started. The destruction of the Syndicate fleet changed everything. Species that had ignored humanity for centuries suddenly wanted to talk. Diplomatic messages flooded Earth's communication networks. Trade proposals, alliance offers, requests for protection. The galaxy had learned to fear the small blue planet, and fear, as it turned out, it was an excellent foundation for respect. Secretary of Defense Linda Patterson established a new diplomatic framework based on simple principles. Earth would trade with species that treated humans fairly. Earth would protect species that had shown humanity kindness. Earth would destroy any threat to human lives, anywhere in the galaxy, without warning or mercy. The rules were clear. The consequences were certain. And for the first time in galactic history, the youngest species was setting the terms. Dr. Nathan Cole continued his work on Luna, but his focus had shifted. Instead of catching up to alien technology, he was now pushing beyond it. His team developed new weapons, new shields, new engines that made their previous breakthroughs look primitive. Each advancement widened the gap between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. But Cole also worked on peaceful technologies. Medical systems that could cure diseases aliens had considered untreatable. Agricultural techniques that could feed entire planets. Power generators that provided clean energy without limit. These technologies, he believed, would ultimately prove more valuable than any weapon. "We have the power to destroy," he told President Grant during a private meeting, "but we also have the power to heal. If we use both wisely, we can reshape the galaxy into something better than it has ever been." Grant listened carefully. He was older now, in his late 70s, but his mind remained sharp. The years of isolation had changed him. The revelation about Kepler 4.4 to be had hardened him. But he had not lost sight of who humans were supposed to be. "What do you propose?" he asked. Cole smiled. "There is a species called the Marani. They are peaceful, intelligent, and creative. For thousands of years, the Council has exploited them because they refuse to build weapons. They are treated as servants, their art and culture dismissed as worthless. I believe we should offer them our protection." In exchange for what?" "Nothing," Cole said. "Friendship. The chance to show the galaxy that humanity is more than just a military power?" Grant considered this for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Do it." The Marani were small beings with delicate features and skin that changed color with their emotions. When the human delegation arrived at their homeworld, the entire population turned a shade of blue that their translators identified as an overwhelming surprise. Ambassador Harris, who had come out of retirement for this mission, addressed the Marani leadership directly. "We know what the Council has done to your people. We know how you have suffered. We are here to offer you a choice. Accept human protection, and no one will ever exploit you again. We ask nothing in return except your friendship." The Marani leader, a small being named Sarath, studied Harris with eyes that held centuries of pain. "Why would you do this?" she asked. "What do you gain?" Harris smiled gently. "We gain the knowledge that we used our power for something good. We gain allies who chose us freely, not out of fear. We gain the chance to prove that humanity is better than the species who abandoned us." Sarath's skin shifted through several colors before settling on a warm gold that the translators called hope. "We accept," she said. News of the Marani alliance spread quickly. Other exploited species began reaching out to Earth, hoping for similar arrangements. The Council watched with growing alarm as humanity built a network of allies completely outside their control. The Korthian Empire decided that this could not be allowed to continue. The Korthians were the oldest and most powerful species in the Council. Their empire had existed for over 100,000 years. They had conquered dozens of worlds, crushed countless rebellions, and never once faced a serious challenge to their dominance. They looked at humanity's growing influence and saw a threat that had to be eliminated. Their war council met in the ancient fortress on their homeworld. General Voroth, the most decorated commander in Korthian history, presented his plan. "The humans are dangerous," he acknowledged. "Their technology is impressive, but they are still few in number. Their fleet, while powerful, cannot be everywhere at once. If we strike at Earth directly with overwhelming force, we can end this threat before it grows any larger." The Korthian Emperor, a massive creature covered in ceremonial scars, considered this advice. How many ships would be required? 5,000, Vorath replied. The largest fleet ever assembled. We will leave nothing to chance. The Emperor nodded his approval. Make it so. The assembly of the Korthian armada took 3 months. Ships gathered from across their vast empire, forming a fleet that darkened the space around their staging area. When the last vessel arrived, Vorath addressed his commanders with absolute confidence. The humans have never faced a force like this, he said. Their tricks and their technology will not save them. We will burn their world and scatter their ashes across the stars. This I promise you. The fleet departed through a series of jump gates, traveling toward the Sol system. Korthian propaganda broadcasts announced their coming. Declaring that humanity's brief moment of defiance was about to end, General Patricia Shaw watched the broadcasts from her command center on Mars. She was 72 years old now, and she had been preparing for this moment since the day she took command of the Earth Defense Force. They are announcing their arrival, she observed. They want us to know they are coming. Commander Lisa Grant stood beside her, reviewing tactical displays. It is a psychological tactic. They hope to frighten us into surrender. Shaw laughed, a dry sound without humor. They have no idea who they are dealing with. Status of the fleet. 2,000 ships ready for deployment. Stealth systems are fully operational. Good, begin positioning. I want every ship hidden before the Korthians arrive. The human fleet scattered throughout the Sol system, concealing themselves behind moons, inside asteroid fields. Within the radiation belts of the outer planets, their stealth technology rendered them invisible to every form of detection the Council had ever developed. To any sensor in the galaxy, the Sol system appeared completely undeft when the Korthian armada arrived through the outermost jump gate. General Vorath surveyed the space before him with satisfaction. Earth hung in the distance, a small blue dot surrounded by nothing but empty space. Where is their fleet? One of his officers asked. Fled, Vorath replied confidently. They know they cannot stand against us. They have abandoned their homeworld to its fate. He ordered the advance toward Earth. 5,000 ships moved forward in perfect formation, their weapons charging. Their crews celebrating their inevitable victory. They made it halfway across the system. Before Lisa Grant's voice echoed across every Korthian communication channel, General Vorath, this is Commander Lisa Grant of the Earth Defense Force. You are surrounded. Look around you. The Korthians looked, and what they saw froze the blood in their veins. Human ships emerged from everywhere, from behind Jupiter's moons, from within Saturn's rings, from the asteroid belt, from positions so close that the Korthians could not understand how they had not detected them. 2,000 vessels, each one bristling with weapons that made Korthian technology look ancient. Your fleet is impressive, Grant continued, her voice calm and almost friendly. But you have made a serious mistake. You announced your coming. You gave us time to prepare. And you assumed that because we are young, we are foolish. Vorath stared at his tactical displays in disbelief. The human ships had completely surrounded his fleet. There was no escape route, no safe direction. Every path led into the guns of an enemy he could not understand. You have one chance, Grant said. Turn around now. Leave this system. Take your ships and go home. Do this, and we will consider this a misunderstanding. Stay, and not one of your vessels will survive. Vorath was old, but he was not stupid. He had seen the recordings from the Syndicate engagement. He had studied the reports of human military capabilities, and he knew with terrible certainty that the human commander was not bluffing. All ships, he said slowly, each word feeling like a knife in his pride, reverse course. We are withdrawing. The mighty Korthian armada turned and fled. 5,000 ships, the most powerful force in galactic history, ran away from a species they had dismissed as primitive children. Grant watched them go with no expression on her face. There would be no celebration, no victory speeches. This was simply the natural consequence of threatening humanity. But across the galaxy, billions of beings watched in shock. The empire that had dominated known space for 100, 1,000 years had just retreated without firing a single shot. The balance of power in the universe had shifted forever. The Korthian retreat marked the end of an era. Within months, the Galactic Council effectively dissolved. Without the Syndicate's enforcement arm and the Korthian Empire's military intimidation, the alliance that had governed the galaxy for millennia simply fell apart. Species that had been bound together by fear found that they had nothing else in common. Some council members tried to form new alliances among themselves, but these efforts collapsed almost immediately. Trust, once broken, could not be easily repaired. The revelation that 3 species had secretly funded the attack on Kepler 442b had poisoned every relationship in the chamber. No one knew who else might have been involved. No one knew who might betray them next. In the vacuum left by the Council's collapse, humanity emerged as the new center of galactic civilization. Species that wanted protection came to Earth. Species that wanted trade came to Earth. Species that simply wanted to understand how the youngest civilization in the galaxy had risen so far, so fast, came to Earth. President Samuel Grant, now 81 years old, addressed the United Nations on the 15th anniversary of Earth's withdrawal from the Council. His hair had gone completely white, and he walked with a slight limp, but his voice still carried the strength that had guided humanity through its darkest years. "We did not seek this power," he said. "When we left the Council, we were desperate and alone. We had no plan to dominate the galaxy. We simply wanted to survive. But the universe taught us a harsh lesson. Weakness invites exploitation. The strong prey upon the weak. This is not right, but it is true. And so we chose to become strong." He paused, looking out at the assembly of human representatives and the alien delegations that had been invited to witness this moment. Strength alone, however, is not enough. A species that is only strong becomes a tyrant. A species that is only kind becomes a victim. We must be both. We must be powerful enough that no one dares threaten our people, and wise enough to use that power justly. Across human space, the changes were visible everywhere. New colonies had been established on worlds that the Council had once claimed as their own. Human ships traveled freely through regions that had been closed to them for centuries. Earth's economy had grown beyond anything its founders had imagined. But the changes went deeper than territory and wealth. Humanity had transformed itself. The isolation years had forced people to work together in ways they never had before. Old divisions of nation and culture had faded, as everyone focused on the shared goal of survival. Earth was more united now than at any point in its history. Dr. Nathan Cole, now in his 70s, continued to lead the research programs that had made humanity's rise possible. His latest project was perhaps his most ambitious yet, sharing human technology with allied species, helping them develop their own capabilities so they would not depend on Earth's protection forever. Right. Could keep our advantages to ourselves, he explained to a group of Marani scientists visiting Luna. We could remain the only power in the galaxy capable of challenging the old empires. But that would make us no better than the Council. Instead, we choose to lift others up. We choose to create partners, not servants. The Marani scientists listened with their skin glowing, the warm gold color of hope. For the first time in their species-long history, they were being treated as equals by a more powerful civilization. It was something they had never expected to experience. Secretary Patterson retired that year, replaced by a younger generation of leaders who had grown up during the isolation. They carried none of the old fear, none of the memories of begging the Council for help. They'd only known a humanity that stood on its own feet, that bowed to no one, that reached out in friendship to those who deserved it and struck down those who threatened it. Ambassador Daniel Harris, 73, had also retired. He lived in a small house in the mountains of Montana, far from the centers of power. He spent his days reading, gardening, and occasionally advising young diplomats who came to learn from his experience. His granddaughter, a young woman named Alina, who had recently graduated from the military academy, visited him on a cool autumn afternoon. She found him sitting on his porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and red. "Grandfather," she said, settling into a chair beside him, "may I ask you something?" Harris smiled. Of course, were we right? To become so powerful that everyone fears us? Sometimes I wonder if we have lost something important. The other species look at us with terror in their eyes. Is that really what we wanted? Harris considered the question for a long moment. He thought about the 40,000 people who had died on Kepler 442b. He thought about the years of condescension and manipulation. He thought about the council delegates who had laughed when he announced humanity's withdrawal. Fear is not our goal, he finally said. Respect is. But the galaxy taught us that respect must be earned through strength. The council species had 10,000 years of peace. They forgot what it meant to struggle, to fight, to survive against all odds. We never had that luxury. We had to prove ourselves every single day. Lena nodded slowly. And now? Now we have a choice, Harris replied. We can use our power to dominate, like the empires that came before us. Or we can use it to build something better, something the galaxy has never seen. He gestured toward the stars that were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Look at them. Billions of worlds. Trillions of lives. Most of them have never known anything except the old order. Exploitation, fear, the strong taking from the weak. We have the chance to change that. We have the chance to show them that there is another way. Elena followed his gaze upward. The stars seemed brighter somehow, full of possibility rather than threat. The Marani are thriving under our protection, she said. Other species are beginning to trust us. Maybe we can do it. Maybe we can build something worth believing in. Harris smiled, a genuine smile that made him look years younger. That is exactly what we are going to do. Not because we are forced to. Not because we need something in return, but because it is right. Far away, in the depths of space, human ships patrolled the borders of protected territory. They watched for pirates, for slavers, for any threat to the species that had placed their trust in Earth's protection. When they found such threats, they eliminated them with cold efficiency. When they found ships in distress, regardless of species, they offered aid without hesitation. The galaxy watched humanity with a mixture of fear and fascination. The youngest species had become the most powerful. The civilization that had been dismissed as primitive had surpassed all others. And instead of becoming tyrants, they had become something unexpected. They had become guardians. Not everyone accepted this new order. There were still enemies. There were still those who resented humanity's rise and plotted revenge. But they were few, and they were cautious. They had seen.